Very often, when we think about moss, we don't think much of it outside of understanding the adage of moss grows on the north side of trees. We see it, it is somewhat pleasing to the eyes, but we don't think much of it. But there is more to this plant than you would think. For starters, it is a non-vascular plant. It is not like this plant here. This is a vascular plant. It has a root system. It has a vascular system. Moss, this moss, is a non-vascular plant. It does not have a root system. It's not vascular. It doesn't have a vascular system. It is a bryophyte. B-R-Y-O-P-H-Y-T-E. Bryophyte. That is what moss is. But there's even more to moss that you need to know. Moss actually has some benefits. Moss is good for the soil. You have to think about moss like this. Moss is very helpful in preventing soil erosion, or at the very least reducing it. Because with moss, the rhizoids that anchor it to the soil or to the rocks, it helps hold the soil particles together. And it's very absorbent. So it can absorb moisture. Given an opportunity, the moisture that is being absorbed by the moss, not all of it's going to get to the soil right away. So you're not going to have so much water being absorbed by the soil right away, because a lot of it's going to be absorbed by the moss. While the plants and trees on the creek banks here are helpful in flood control, flood mitigation, and in erosion, moss has a role in this all its own. If you were to plant moss in large amounts on these creek banks, this is how it would help. For starters, the moss itself, it would absorb some of the water. So if it rained a lot and the water started rising a lot, the moss could absorb some of that water, sort of mitigating an erosion effect on the banks. As you can see, these banks have their own share of erosion. The moss will slow down the rate in which the soil will absorb the water by the moss absorbing the water itself. One other thing that needs to be understood: creeks often get a lot of water from stormwater. And one thing about moss can absorb a lot of stormwater. And for that reason, it can slow down the chances of flooding. And if you were to... One thing about flooding, if there's nothing to stop flooding, it'll increase rapidly. Moss helps to slow it down. Its absorbency helps to add another permeable surface on top of a permeable surface. You have to think about moss as being more than something that grows on trees. You should think of it in terms of how it helps the environment and how it can be a plant used in mitigating erosion, and it can mitigate floods. How it mitigates that, you have to understand the properties of moss. Very absorbent. It can hold the soil together. It can slow down flooding by its absorbent qualities. If you like this video, be sure to check out other videos on my channel. As always, leave a comment, like, and subscribe.